It's just as genre-bending and mind-melting as you would have imagined, but not how you would have imagined it. And to be totally honest, I wouldn't have expected anything else. Hey there guys, welcome back, and hello if you are new. So in 2021, Between the Buried and Me returned to the world of 2007's Colours with an absolute masterwork that was Colours 2. And it was an album really that was deserving more of Terminator 2 and Aliens accolades than it was, thankfully, Gladiator 2 or Jurassic World. Now, 4 years later, on their 11th full-length studio album and in a new home, courtesy of Inside Out, we look at The Blue Nowhere. So if you're not familiar with Between the Buried and Me, they really are pioneers of progressive metal. They've been together for a staggering 25 years and have released 10 records so far. And within that, they've incorporated all sorts of subgenres from surf rock, vaudevillian theatre, country, which is a pretty big one, but all in this signature melting pot of extreme styles, you know, like death metal, black metal elements, all of the things you would normally associate with something extreme. So after the return to Colours and the, you know, specific callbacks to the first record, the sort of self-referential idea of it, The Blue Nowhere, I think, sees the band reaching into their toolbox, and instead of, you know, the interesting idea of looking in their past, they're very much looking towards their future now. As ever with Between the Buried and Me, they're pushing their sound further forward, and this is also the first album that they've ever released as a 4-piece. So this isn't strictly a concept album, but more of a gathering together of thoughts that sort of exist in this place, which is the Blue Nowhere. And that's kind of like the metaphor of the hotel, I think, which is in that visualizer for the things we tell ourselves in the dark. Sonically, I think the Blue Nowhere sits somewhere between Coma Ecliptic and the Parallax, that sort of era. It's definitely very aggressive, but also has a huge amount of melody, maybe more than they've ever really had, I think, and has that sort of prog rock feel to it quite a lot. So there are elements of this album that tread familiar ground. Absent Thereafter has that sort of country style, like breakdown section, which we've heard, you know, previously. But then there's also that sort of whimsical feel to the band on Door Number 3. However, where the newer sort of genres appear and, you know, that sort of pushing the envelope is like, for example, funk, which I think is seen in Things We Tell Ourselves in the Dark. And then Mirador Uncoil has got this really quite cinematic clarinet section, which follows this sort of Arabian style scale, which I thought was really interesting and very different for the band. A personal favourite, though, I think, is God Terror, which kind of experiments with breakbeats. And I remember the first time listening to that thinking, ooh, this is definitely something the band haven't done before. And then we've got Slow Paranoia, which has a little bit more synthesizers to it, which is quite interesting. And there's also definitely a kind of like floating feeling, you know, which I think is very characteristic of Between the Buried and Me, and that's on Psychomantium. But what I really, really love about this record is the sense of the cinematic behind it. I feel like they've really nailed that on this album. Slow Paranoia, for example, dips its toe into that sort of Danny Elfman style Tim Burton world. And then we've got, you know, the nice sort of relaxing moments of Pause and Mirador Uncoil, because it sort of just lets you breathe a little bit. But it's the title track of The Blue Nowhere that is absolutely my favourite track on this album. It has a sort of maturity to it that incorporates this orchestral arrangement, and then it almost sounds kind of like, you know, like Bryan Adams almost, which was really weird. I didn't sort of expect that at all. And the double whammy of the Blue Nowhere into Beautifully Human really creates that sort of crescendo, which, you know, Between the Buried and Me are so great at. And I always think, you know, the ending of a record is probably one of the most important things, and the way that it sort of melts into Tommy basically saying things we tell ourselves in the dark, and then if you were to press play on the first song, it's literally like cyclical, so you could just go straight back into it again and again and again. I thought that was really cool. But I think that one of the biggest changes about this album is that it really feels like the songwriting has overridden this whole sort of like mashing together of genres and whatever sort of, you know, kind of crazy stuff they sort of come up with. Each of these songs are really well crafted, and I think there's no real fat on these songs either. The only negative I would say about this album is it may be a little bit daunting for people to get into. Personally, I think it's probably one of the most digestible Between the Buried and Me records, but I know that their sound can be quite intimidating for some people, but personally I absolutely love it. On their 11th album, Between the Buried and Me prove that they have pieced together every single element that they've learned, all the different ideas they've played with, to create their, without a doubt, most mature record to date, I think, and also reinvent themselves at the same time. Sure, there's definitely things that we're familiar with, but they are absolutely treading new ground as well. It's just as genre-bending and mind-melting as you would have imagined, but not how you would have imagined it. And to be totally honest, I wouldn't have expected anything else. Absolutely brilliant. Definitely my albums of the year list. So I hope you guys enjoyed this album review. Let me know what you think in the comments underneath me. If you did enjoy this video, it'd be great if you could hit that like and subscribe button. And I will see you guys very, very soon for more album reviews, interviews, and metal goodness. Take care, my friends.